Welcome to Wild Soul Gathering. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie, and I'll be your host for this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. Hello to all you wild souls out there. I want to send a special thank you to each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to join and listen to our guests as we discuss the many aspects of spirituality. To stay updated on our latest releases, please follow us, share with friends who may be interested, and if you feel so moved, a kind rating and review is always appreciated. In the tradition of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Hi, welcome to Wild Soul Gathering. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie, and I'll be your host for this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. Well, today on the show, I truly do have a wild soul who has been very spiritually curious. I feel like she's almost dedicated her life to this journey. So welcome to the show, Brittany Urbansky.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. When we were talking the other day, our brief conversation really went in depth with yoga, and I had no idea about all the different aspects of yoga, the connections with spirituality, and that there were so many different types, different ways that it worked. But before we get into that, I know that you've been on this spiritual journey probably since your late teens. You're a huge Reiki enthusiast. You went to a naturopath, alternative medicine college. You want to just talk and let the listeners know a little bit about your spiritual journey and how you got to where you're at today?
Sometimes it's hard to even know where it all started because, like you said, it seems that it started so long ago. You were just a part of that beginning process for me. So fascinating looking back on it all. I do believe that a lot of the trauma that I had in childhood just led me right to this path of liberation. It's almost like it was fast tracked. It was like I agreed to have some suffering in the beginning, and in exchange, you're going to get all of this amazing ancient information, just like that's what you need on the path. But it's just like really interesting to look back on it all. So yeah, I don't even know where to start. A medical Reiki master. After I met you, I went on to meet Raven Keys, which was a total amazing honor. I studied at Everglades University for Bachelor's of Science, majoring in alternative and complementary medicine for a few years. And then I went on to meet Dr. Chris Wave, who was a naturopathic doctor. And I do hesitate to say doctor because she's so humble and not all states recognize naturopathic doctors too. I just want to give her full honor. And I went on to do quite a few apprenticeships with her, from learning basic herbology and how to apply it to the human body in a modern time and how we can use it present day. Before all that, when I left Ohio, I met my yoga teacher, Elizabeth Hoffman, who is the owner of Urban Bliss. And I studied with her, never stopped studying with her ever since 2012. And then eventually she invited me to be one of the lead yoga teacher trainers for Urban Bliss, which is just such a huge, amazing honor to work so closely with someone who really had such authentic lifestyle in yoga. So I was able to learn a lot from her. Still do.
Yeah, awesome. So Urban Bliss, is that your venue that you do your work through?
Yeah, it is. Yep. I just partnered with my yoga teacher and we just work closely together, and everything's like really interwoven. And it's really interesting because before I met her and I was thinking I need a business name and journaling down all these ideas like what love, kindness, healing, and like all these key words, you're trying to find a title. And then I just looked at my last name and it's like Urban Sky. So I started talking about Urban Sky Wellness and Urban Sky Reiki and then Urban Sky, and then eventually went to yoga. It was just so funny that I ended up at Urban Bliss Yoga School because it was just all unplanned and so many synchronicities there. So it's just really neat.
I love how the world works out like that. Reiki is a core element of everything you do to this day. You infuse it in everything. One of the things I wanted to bring out, because it's an amazing accomplishment, especially for me as a healthcare worker, is you've been on this path probably a good 15 years or so. With your Reiki, you ended up, and you're not a healthcare person, so you don't work in that traditional medical field, but you ended up in a surgical suite during a surgery, gifted the opportunity to do Reiki for a patient. How did that happen? Like, that's my dream, is for all these alternative ways and for traditional medicine really to blend a lot more with the energetic medicine that we know is so powerful. When I saw that you made your way into a surgical suite, I was just so impressed. Do you want to just a quick minute on that?
Yeah, it was a dream come true. It was an absolutely amazing experience. It wasn't planned, it just fell into alignment, which is amazing how that happened. I had a practice alongside a mental health clinic in North Carolina, and one of the clients who I was working closely with needed to have surgery, and she just loved Reiki. You know, it helped her so much. And when I had become medical Reiki master through the Raven Keys program, she just was like, I need to have you there. And she had to be awake for the surgery. It was very interesting. Your main mission in the room is completely them and their higher self and their greater good, and keeping that safe in their soul and their essence protected during that time, where of course the surgical team is also the patient's greater good, but they have a lot that they're focusing on and multitasking. And so a Reiki master has 100% focus on that greater good. It was really amazing and it worked out so well.
I dream of the day where that is more the norm than such an unusual event, being able to do that.
It's
awesome.
Amazing how many more people every day are doing it, and it's growing, and Reiki appearing in hospitals and hospitals having Reiki programs. It's just like, wow, I'm so far since like my attunements with you. You know, it's like, wow, like the Reiki world has grown so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. So that being said, tell me about yoga. Like I had no idea that there were so many different ways of yoga, different aspects. You're really sort of a yoga savant in some way. And I was really amazed at how you match up different yoga with your clients when you get to know them and you better understand what their issues are. For me, I think of yoga as people go to the studio. A lot of focus on it is with almost an exercise in the physical, that people talk about the mind and the spiritual with it, but it seems more like mainstream has made it more an exercise. And now it seems to maybe be transcending back into the spiritual path of its origins. I'm sure you're going to expand on what I said in a whole different way. I was like just awed the last time we talked.
It's like I almost just have to take a breath at a time, because the information is just so amazing and so healing, and can really just help transform somebody's whole life if they're given the proper setup and what yoga can offer in its full authenticity without holding back any parts of it. Like you said, some of that spiritualism, because I do believe what you said is correct. And at some point, you know, even less than 10 years ago, I feel that some stuff was like, hush, hush, don't talk about that part, just the workout aspect. And there was some studio owners that kind of had that mindset because they didn't want to like scare people away. And you're thinking like, how are you going to scare people away? But it really is just how information is presented is important, and sticking to the truth of it all. The problem sometimes happens when opinions get woven into the truth and other intentions and agendas. And sometimes that happens innocently, and sometimes it happens because we have the human mind, and we're just caught up in some of the human drama, some of the teachers will say. I do think it's moving more toward and welcoming more of that spiritual aspect now. And it might be because of some science too that's catching up to it all.
Research is actually starting to prove spirituality and the quantum and all of that. It's a wonderful thing. You're seeing this big shift with it.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about, you told me that there was 8 different styles of yoga. About some of them?
Yeah, so there is so many styles of yoga, but I think too with the 8, there's an 8-step path to yoga. So rewinding, there is a system of yoga. And what is yoga? Yoga is about union, and that goes back to its ancient definition of yoke and bringing together. It's closing those gaps of duality, and we use that for our mind. And there's an 8-step process to that, to helping, if you will, control the mind. And ultimately, we do that in a yoga practice to achieve that 8-step, which is liberation or bliss. And what that is union with the divine, because nothing is better than that union, the complete bliss. And it's actually so much bliss that you don't even know you're in it until you're like coming out of it, and you're just in that space, and you're like, wow, because you're past it, you go past the awareness of the I. So that 8-step path of yoga falls on, so there's different lineages of yoga too. India has lots of different cities and towns and space from those different spaces have different lineages and paths to do ultimately that union with the divine. One of those paths or systems is that 8-step path. Yes, the 8 limbs of yoga, it's well known as.
Okay.
And so there are different paths to yoga. Traditionally, they're known as the karma yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga, and bhakti yoga. A lot of my time was spent in the topic of raja yoga. And I would say present day, it's a complete embodiment of all of them, but I feel like I'll just always be so involved in that raja yoga topic. And what raja yoga is concerned with is the mind. It's the yoga of the mind. But we're really not going to get any control of the mind if we're just completely not doing anything with the body. So a big part of this Raja Yoga, that step in there, in that 8th step, you are using your body as a tool. We're moving the energy through the body while we move it and breathe and go through these 8 steps. Jnana Yoga, another portion of the path of yoga, is the path of self-study, is the path of wisdom, of knowledge. And some people will equate that or say it's similar with just a very deep faith. It's a faith that's so strong that you don't necessarily you don't feel no need to explain it or how the information is there. It's just there. And it might be there from years of studying the scriptures, which is a very common way for jnana yoga, whatever scriptures those are. Speaking of, it reminds us that yoga is non-secular. It does not intrude on anybody's religion. That's a whole other topic we can come back to. However, it is very spiritual and based. So of course, it's asking you to look at, your own truth with spiritualism. And some people that's going to identify as Christian or Hindu or no spiritualism, etc. It goes on, I feel like, indefinitely. With that being said, jnana yoga is study of your scriptures, that truth. And then that strong faith just solidifies deep within you and it will radiate off. Karma yoga, the path of selfless service. And it's very interesting because it's the path of selfless service with no expectation. And sometimes we start it with expectation. That's totally fine. Totally fine. You hold the door open. Somebody might expect someone to say thank you. But at some point, you just do with zero expectation. It literally is like the divine just walking through the door. I would never, expect Jesus to turn around and say thank you. So it's so funny because it's just not there. And that's where ultimately a karma path will lead to this enlightenment too, and this union with the divine, feeling that ultimate bliss, which is that goal of yoga, no matter what path we're taking. And then we have that path of bhakti yoga. And it's well known as worship, path of worship, praise and love and gratitude, all for the divine. So, you think like, how can you separate any of these paths of yoga? But I tend to think like something pulls you in and then it kind of might evolve from there. So yeah, you have the paths of yoga. Traditionally, there's those 4 paths. So then you'll hear hatha yoga. We're offering hatha yoga classes. And really that has to do with moving the physical bodies. Some people modern day might say it's a path of yoga, but traditionally it does fall under one of those 4 paths. And same with Tantra, the path of rituals. So there's a lot of different ways. And of course there's like the number one way we think we're like sexy time. And it's like, okay, but there's a lot. It's like, it can be a path of pleasure because at one point pleasure was just like a no matter whatever type of pleasure, it was just like, no, it was very acidic mindset at some point. And so Tantra, the path of rituals, it could fall under some of those other 4 traditionals. I'm a very traditional type of mindset yogi. That's just interesting to know.
What about hot yoga? I hear all of these trends.
Mm-hmm.
I know at one point hot yoga was a big trend.
Oh yeah, hot yoga was a big trend. Hot yoga probably is still a big trend. People during the pandemic, people would do anything for their hot yoga, turning the showers on and making saunas in the bathroom. And it's really interesting. And there's nothing wrong with it. But I just always go back to what's the intention here? Like, what's the intention behind it? Like, are we using that heat for the right intention? And, they probably are, but I'm sure in some cases it gets a little extreme. It's an interesting topic. So like, what's the whole point of hot yoga? We always want to go back to intentions of everything. I think is always like a nice place to start. And relatively speaking, hot yoga is more of a newer phenomenon in the yoga world. Like they just started adding heat a few decades ago. The heat, depth, and we want to think back to the beginning. And so it goes back to thinking about the 8 limbs that you had mentioned. We went through those paths and we say that Raja Yoga, the path of the mind. Like, okay, let's pull that out from the bucket and let's highlight this Raja Yoga topic. So part of Raja Yoga, this yoga path of the mind, is going to involve the 8 limb system. And so you think of it as an 8-step process. And the third step is yoga asanas, the postures. The fourth step is you breathe. And this is what I tell my public yoga students that are showing up to a yoga class. Once you start to learn the poses, what do I do now? And you say, you just be. And you breathe. And it sounds so simple, but it's not. Otherwise, we would all be doing it all the time. And that could take decades to start to get into. But if you get that far and you start to breathe in these different shapes, something that can happen is called withdrawal of the senses, pratyahara. There's different types of withdrawal of the senses, and that's a whole other conversation. But we'll just go here for now, these basic senses. You can withdraw from the senses. If you are focusing that mind on this inhale, on this exhale, eventually, with enough discipline, you're not going to feel the heat. And some of these rooms are so hot, you go in and you're like, my eyeballs are on fire, my tongue is on fire, like the inside of my ear is like, it's the craziest thing. And Mary Jarvis, she is known to say one time, some of you come into the hot room thinking it's not going to be hot or not wanting it to be hot. Because sometimes like that mind is just like, I got to get out of here. It's so hot. And it can just totally consume you. Honestly, in my experience, what I've learned is the moment I stop focusing on the breath for any reason, whether it's a bead of sweat, should I get a sip of water, even though I know better, what's that person doing over there? All of a sudden you're on fire. So it's a very interesting tool. It can be used as a tool to help us overcome the senses, to help motivate us with that. Can it be abused? Absolutely, like anything else. It can become addictive when I say that. That heat can become very addictive for some people, just like going to the gym every day. And I think just remembering the purpose of it. There's a concept called tapas, which is this discipline and purifying action. And the heat, and we sweat and we bring ourselves in and we sacrifice this time to come in, to be with the divine and challenge my senses with this heat can be a very, very, very powerful, amazing experience. It helps us gain self-control, inner insight. It helps us know our triggers. You will find your triggers so quickly in a hot yoga room. It's amazing. The distractions, really, all of it is what is a distraction. We also know that the heat then is purifying our mind, our body, and our soul is another concept to that. I'm a huge believer in the health benefits of hot yoga when done correctly. I'm a huge believer that it can help you learn to love yourself and to help you love you to take care of yourself, because the first few classes you're like, okay, that was hard. And even in the middle of the first class, you'll be thinking maybe I'm never coming back to this. But then you leave and you have like these feelings of peace and cleanliness and sometimes you just don't know. You're just like, something. All right. And next thing you know, you're going back to it. And that's a beautiful thing to see as a teacher. That's a great thing to see.
When you're talking to people, one of the things that came up in the last conversation was you talked about having a client come to you who was struggling with depression, having a hard time getting up, getting out of the house on set, some part of that path, versus having a client come in working 80 hours a day. They're always on the go, they're multitasking, and there's also social media. So would you recommend the same yoga for each of them, or would you look at it a little differently, or what's the mindset with that?
This is a great question, and it's a really great topic of conversation. It reminds me and makes me think of the classic, I was told to do yoga to feel better. And then so you just appear in the first yoga class you see because you were told that yoga is going to help you feel better. I do believe that any yoga is going to help and any yoga has purpose, but there's definitely different types of yoga. And so there's those paths we talked about. But in modern day, we have a lot of different types of yoga classes. Most of them are going to fall under that Raja category, although we're only using that third part. We're only using the posture a lot of time. So that will come in. So with that being said, yoga is helping you find your peace. And a good question teacher always asks is, how do you turn something into kindness that's disturbing your inner peace? When something disturbs your inner peace, how do you turn that into kindness? And I think that when we're considering a yoga type of yoga class for our own self, we want to look in there and see what's going to help me find that peace. What do I feel is missing missing? What irritates me? And having an honest look at yourself and kind of checking that out. If we can do that with that honest eye and honest approach, then it might be a little bit easier to navigate what type of yoga class to go to. While a yoga teacher, keep in mind, cannot diagnose or treat any sort of illness, mental illness, physical illness, just any type of hyphenated ease you want to throw in there. I do like to use, as an individual, somebody who's had the holistic health training and a holistic health practice, and using yoga as one of my tools. Yeah, we have been able to help a lot of people, especially when partnered at the mental health clinic, even with things as deep as depression. And so you got to think, like, what kind of depression am I working with? Am I working with where I'm laying in bed all day? Do I have like high anxiety type of depression? So this is so we're thinking like, how is my life? What am I doing? What am I not doing? The key words would be aversion and attachment is what we would want to bring it down to, probably part of the klesha system. This aversion and attachment, do you avoid getting your heart rate up? And I did for a long time. We could go to all sorts of root causes. So it's like, okay, you want to lay around and we don't really do a lot. So we're going to want to start to get this body moving, where some people who are just constantly moving, constantly on the go, don't sit still. And if you ask them to sit still for 30 seconds, you will see things come up. You can feel it come up, and it's very difficult. It's very challenging. I will very often say the hardest yoga is the stillness yoga. For some people, it can be very hard. We have to do the work sometimes to get there. And some of that work is doing it. You just have to do it. You have to try. So for some people, just sitting for 30 seconds to 3 minutes is going to be a very powerful yoga practice. And that doesn't even move the body too much. Get some stretches out so that you can sit for 30 seconds. If you have pain in your neck, move the neck around for a moment, take a couple breaths, and then just sit there and breathe. What we need to know is that there are a lot of different types of yoga classes out there. And if you take a closer look at yourself and what you're doing, what you avoid and what you feel attached to, and then going to a yoga class that's going to highlight some of that for you, that's going to be a quick path to enlightenment. Now, a lot of people won't do it. Sometimes we might not know, but also, you'll hear, I'm not going in the hot room. It's too hot. Too hot for me too. Shit. You think I'm not hot? I'm hot, but I want to feel better. I want to heal. There's a lot of different styles of yoga, and I can go into talking about them. And it comes down to any amount. Some people, they might have a parent. It's hard to get them on a bed, but if they can just sit up on the bed and just get them breathing, take cleansing breaths, let something go, sigh it out, just let something go, and just have them breathe as they move their arms. They don't have to bring them up too high if it hurts. It's just any amount is good amount. Any amount of movement for somebody in that situation, any amount of stillness for somebody on that other side of the spectrum is going to be very powerful. Any amount of stillness.
That is so fascinating. You've talked about a lot of, can you tie in the physical, spiritual, emotional part of this? You touched on it in the beginning.
Yeah, I always think back to my teacher's words. Yoga is teaching us. It's always teaching us, and it's teaching us to think about, and it's teaching us to realize, and it's teaching us to become aware of our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Because there is no getting that control of the mind if we don't start to become aware of what we're thinking about. And what we're thinking about, we tend to start to think about, and when we think about, we start to say, and what we say, we start to do, and it's a big circle. And so yoga is helping us become aware and control and think about what we're thinking about, what we say, and how we behave. It's showing us our habits. It's helping us change our habits. It's all connected. It's helping us rewire, if you will, completely. As you start to do something as simple as realize your left from your right side in a yoga class, and how that's going to have a new electrical connection in the brain. It's connected. And we know that our posture affects our mind, and our mind affects our posture. And we can think of that. You think of a time you were really sad and you're kind of falling over, or people are guarded, might have something across them, holding on. And even if we think like confident, good, and walking through and taking up space, they know that they deserve to take up space, or if it gets extreme. It's interesting, the connection of posture to mind and mind to posture. And in a yoga practice, you're continuously going through different postures and spending the time and breath in each one. And so if you are going to be thinking, which most of us is going to take, lifetimes maybe to not be thinking, then you want to be thinking about your relationship with this pose. So you get into the pose, so you've been going to classes and you understand like how to get into a triangle pose for your body safely. It looks different than the person next to you and all that groovy stuff. And then you're like sending this special type of breath control in and out. And you're like, well, I should be just letting go of all my senses, but that's not happening. And it's like, that's okay. Don't worry. Just keep doing the work. It's all on its way. But in the meantime, notice how this pose is affecting you. Can you feel the arms pulling apart? Can you feel the opening of the front of the body? Can you feel your feet grounding into the earth? And you start to kind of move through this checklist then. And it starts to really help us learn our body in a whole new way. That mind-body connection can be very powerful. And again, we have a lot of different types of, I hate using the word like a disorder, disalignment when it comes to our connection with our body, especially women with how society's pushed on us, and really with men too. Men are really left out a lot. I have seen it firsthand. A lot of men need this healing too. So I don't want to exclude them. And a lot of men too deal with body dysmorphia and all sorts of stuff and not being heard. And so it's a beautiful practice for everybody. But it can really help us become aware when we like step the right foot out hip width distance, hip width. Put your hands on your hip bone. Find where that bone is and step out that distance. And people will step out like the size of their mat. And you're like, your hips are not that big. But it's a beautiful thing over time as people start to love their body and they start to appreciate the body for everything that it can do. Like, wow, like I am here doing this. That confidence then, and you know probably better than anybody, just all of that solar chakra healing. It's just all of it. When we change the shape, we're energetically changing the alignment. We're sending life force energy through the body in that particular shape. And things happen that we're aware of and unaware of. Sometimes we have the answer of why, and sometimes we don't. And we're just like, wow. And it's amazing how things fall into place.
It's beautiful. You really have taken this to a whole new level. I would like to just sway off the path for a moment. Last time we got together, we had a bit of a conversation on fixing people, especially when we talk about empaths and healers and people who really gravitate towards wanting to help others. And so a differentiation between fixing and helping. You really provided some very profound insights when we spoke that day, and I would love if you could share them with the audience.
Yeah, I would love to. I think that can kind of come back to the ability of holding space and how difficult that can be for us, especially Westerners, because we're kind of used to compartmentalizing everything and putting it in good or bad or whatever label. It could be anything. And the ability to hold space then is being able to rise above that and just be. It can be challenging, especially with the mind.
You talked about the disservice to the other person.
Yeah.
People.
I was thinking about that a little bit this morning too. So we were talking about those the 8 steps of yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga. In the first limb of yoga, the yamas, it really breaks into 5 different parts, and it's not too intense. It's really about how we interact with the outside world, and it's giving us a guide to help us achieve this liberation. If that's a goal of yours, then these 5 recommendations might help, like nonviolence and non-stealing. So that non-stealing, an interesting one, is called the steya. So when we look at another person's suffering, a lot of times we want to take it away. We want to stop the suffering, of course, because we love them. And so we explore that topic. I love them. I love them unconditionally, no matter what's going on. To love somebody unconditionally like that, you have to be able to keep your heart open. And that can take a practice to do. Because when your heart is open, you might start to feel what they're feeling. You might start to feel that sadness and drama of the current moment. Oh, this is so terrible. It is terrible. Now we're both crying. And so while we can have empathy for somebody, we also want to stay grounded in that greater truth. And everybody's having their experiences that they need to have for their dharma and their purpose of being here. And I understand that through a particular lens that can sound pretty harsh. But we also said we keep our empathy. We said we keep that unconditional love. We got to keep everything that's been mentioned moving forward in the conversation. But we also want to, again, stay grounded in that larger truth. And so if I just want to come in and take all the pain away, I'm really stealing the experience from that person. Ultimately, is not what I do believe. And while we can help, only that person is going to be able to change their suffering or not. We are completely in control of how much we choose to suffer. We're not in control of the experience experiences that we have or are given, they're not fair sometimes. They might not seem fair. But the thing is what are we here for? And some people are here to have a good time. Some people are here to have a good time, but also try to awaken their consciousness along the way. And if we're moving along that mindset, then we think of that. And so I don't know if this is TMI or not, but all my training really came into play one time when the last time I tried to help my brother go through his withdrawal. And if you've been through that experience, you know how intense it really is and how you just want to start crying with them and you just want to take it all away. But through the process of being able to control my mind and to be able to repeat mantras while still staying grounded in the present with him was one of the best things I could do. If I can create a space of bliss, if I can create a holy space for us to do this human work in, that's the best thing I can do, is hold that vibration for that person to have their experience. And when the waves settle down, I'm there. And so we just breathe for the person until they're able to start breathing on their own. But there was a past time where I couldn't do that. It was hard. You're crying. You really get pulled in. And I use the term drama in the lineage sense. We call like this experience we're having, the human play, we're just watching it unfold, is the drama. And we forget that we want to be observing. We're not the actor in the play. We're out here observing, but sometimes we forget and we think we're in the movie that we're watching. We get pulled in and we start to become the actor. And then the next thing you know, you're riding out that dramatic wave, making things a little bit harder than they need to be. I think what it comes down to, people are going to have their experiences and we can support them with our boundaries the best way that we can. But ultimately, people have to have their experiences for reasons we might never understand. And we can't steal that away from them. They will have to do the work.
It's very powerful.
It can help give us peace, knowing that it's a game and, there's an even mixture along the path in the game. It's just a game. And if we can not take it so seriously, like, man, you're suffering. Damn. Oh, it sucks. Yeah. Oh, I hate that. What's this going to teach us? What's this going to do? What can I use it for? That's the name of the game.
Beautiful. That was beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you putting yourself out there.
Oh, my pleasure.
I think the words will speak to the people who need to hear them. So thank you.
Thank you.
You have your business, you have some clients, I think you're up in New Mexico these days. Beautiful place. I spent a couple of years there. Gotta love the Red Rocks. And you do some stuff online. What do you do online?
I offer yoga teacher trainings. I offer private training, private classes through an online base. And if you're interested for more information, you just got to go to urbanbliss.com. Very easy to remember. I teach a couple classes at the local gym out here, and it's just been so satisfying. And I've been doing a lot of self-work since I've come out to Albuquerque. I appreciate the time to share any bit of information. And I love how Ram Dass says, we come together to speak about the unspeakable, because yoga really is, and all of this wonderful healing art, it really is a practice and an experience. And we can talk about it all day, but until we start to put it into action, so we have to put it in practice. And that's what yoga is all about. It is the practice, and the goal of practice is that silencing of the mind. And so we use the body. We use the body as a tool to help.
You have given our listeners a lot of food for thought about what yoga is in a more pure sense and how it could benefit them. They have to have skin in the game, obviously. They have someone to coach them or help them, or they link. It's all about linking with a place that meets your needs and speaks to you for sure. Before we wind this up, do you have any thoughts that you would like to leave with the listeners?
I'm just grateful for this time, and we just come together to share our own experiences and what we've gathered along the path. And we just know student teachers always interchangeable, and I'm grateful to share what I have collected so far, and I'm excited to keep learning more.
I'm excited to see what you continue to do, because your path has been very fascinating, and your knowledge base and your education and really your dedication to growing yourself spiritually and healing yourself over the years has just been admirable. I want to thank you. Thank you for being on the show. It's really good to reconnect again.
Absolutely.
And until next time.
Until next time.
I'd like to thank our guests for joining us for this episode of Wild Souls Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To find out more about our guests, how to contact them, or detail on this episode, please see our show notes. You can also visit us at our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We would love to hear from our visitors what you thought of this show. what you would like to see and hear in the future, questions you may have, you can contact us at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.